Hey guys, it's Loaf. Today I'm doing a different kind of build guide. I'm doing a showcase of Maomaox Crit Lich. Lich has always been his bread and butter, and I'm super grateful he's letting me show off this monster of a build. At the time that I recorded this footage, Mao used this build to push rank 1 Lich on the softcore arena ladder. If you'd like to check him out, links to his YouTube and Twitch channel will be in the description below. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get into the build guide. For the first skill on the build, we're going to be using Death Seal. This is going to be our main damage dealer for the build. This is what's creating those big AoE explosions that you were seeing in the intro. So how this skill works is you toggle it to remove all ward and seal your health, preventing it from going above its current value for 5 seconds. You deal more damage equal to a percentage of your missing health, and you take less damage equal to half your percent missing health. Before using this skill, I would recommend getting as close to endurance cap as you can get, and you're going to want at least 10 skill points here in the skill. The first node we're going to go for is Corrupted Consciousness. This is going to give us more increased damage per missing health that we have. Next, you're going to want to go over to Mortal Pulse. This is what's going to cause those waves to come out every single second while you're in a Death Seal. Next, you'll want to come over here, grab the 3 nodes in Desperate Shroud. This is going to give us a whole bunch of armor and stun avoidance per missing health, but the main reason we're coming over here is for this node, Deadlock. So Deadlock is going to make it so when you hit Death Seal, instead of capping your health where it's at when the skill is activated, it's automatically going to bring you down to 33% of your maximum health, which is going to help you always be within your endurance threshold, giving you even more damage reduction and give it a very consistent feel. Next, we're going to go over here and grab these nodes. This is going to add extra duration to Death Seal, making more of those pulses go off, keep it up for longer. You'll then come over to Soul Stability. This is going to make it so any health drain effects will be negated by 100% while you have Death Seal active. This is going to be really important later on for a passive we're going to take on the tree. Next, we're going to go to the Quick and the Dead. So when you release Death Seal, you are granted haste for the duration that Seal is active. This is going to help us move really quickly through the monos. And then the big damage node for us, Doom Call. So you gain a stack of Damned for each second you remain sealed. Waves of Death hit now deal more damage per stack of Damned on yourself. So Damned is a damage over time necrotic spell you're going to be applying. Now, while this is bad, it's going to be draining your health faster while you're in Reaper form. All the leech we get in here is going to more than offset this, and this is going to pair great with the unique weapon that we're going to be using with this build, giving us crazy amounts of damage. Then for our last skill, we're going to be grabbing points into here. This is going to allow your death waves to go off more often, as well as giving it a higher crit chance. We are a crit build, so that's going to synergize great. Now for these points, you're going to be getting a +1 to Death Seal from one of the uniques we're going to be wearing. And then if you can, we're going to try to get +2 or higher on your helmet, which is where all these points are going to come into. These will be the last points though, so grab everything else first while you're leveling this build out. For our second skill, we're going to be using Transplant. This is typically used as a movement skill for the build. However, for this build, it's actually going to be our main damage source outside of Death Seal. So we are setting it up where when you teleport, it creates typically an explosion from where your body used to be and then where you teleport to. We're going to be adding extra explosions that go off with this, as well as making the skill auto-cast some of our skills. So for the first points, we're going to want to go over here into Acolyte's Fervor. This is going to give us increased cast speed. So 30% increased cast speed for 4 seconds. We're then going to go down here into Rain of Blood. This is going to give us an additional explosion that detonates where we arrive on the teleport. Next, you'll want to go over and grab all 3 points into Depravity. This is going to give us additional explosions on arrival. So that's an extra 3 explosions. Next, we're going to grab 2 travel points into Scarlet Rain. So it'll also give us a little bit of area of effect for the explosions. After that, you're going to want to go over to Black Mirror. This is going to cause the transplant to have additional explosions where we leave the teleport from, so where we started it at originally. Next, we'll go over to Ethereal Body. This is simply going to transfer all the damage over from being a physical damage spell over to Necrotic, as we're going to be mainly a Necrotic-based build. After that, we're going to want to grab the 3 points in Dance of Blood. This is going to make it so we automatically cast 3 Rip Bloods at nearby targets whenever we use Transplants. Just adding more clear. Our next skill is going to be Rip Blood, which is going to be another one of the filler spells that we use when Death Seal's on cooldown. So next up, we're going to go to Sticky Blood. This is going to leave a pool of blood where you transplant at. That's going to slow all nearby enemies. Since you are typically transplanting right into the midst of battle, this will help you not get immediately killed by the enemies. They're going to move a little bit slower, make it harder for them to hit you. And then for the last 4 nodes, you're going to go over to Violent Emergence. This is going to add a kill threshold to your explosions. So anytime they hit an enemy that has less than 20% of its health pool, it's going to immediately execute that mob. Now, this is the one skill that I did change slightly from Mao's build. I did actually end up playing this build in hardcore instead of softcore. So the changes that I made is I dropped all 4 points into the kill threshold, as we're going to get kill threshold from another place on the skill tree here in a little bit. And I put these points over into Bone Armor. What Bone Armor does is when you use Transplant, it gives you a buff that gives you 300 increased armor and 12% less damage taken from all sources. And then that lasts for 4 seconds. We're going to be scaling a lot of Transplant cooldown reduction with this build, so we're going to have this up 100% of the time. We're going to put the extra point over here into Plated Bone. This is going to give you 10% increased effect of your bone armor, giving you even more buffs. And then I did also drop 1 point in Acolyte's Fervor, taking away some of the cast speed that we get from that buff and throwing it in so we could cap out Plated Bone, just to give myself that extra defense there that is very much needed in hardcore. Now for our third skill, we're going to be using Rip Blood. So what this is going to do is be our skill that we are spamming in between our transplants and Death Seal. This is going to help us trigger both of the effects on the 2 uniques we're going to be using with this build and give us a little bit of extra damage. How the skill typically works is it does physical damage to an enemy, and then it sends a little health orb back to you that gives you a tiny bit of healing. How we're going to spec this guy, so you're going to first go over to the Heomancer node for some extra cast speed. You're then going to go over to Quenching. This is going to give us some extra health back from the skill, as well as make those health orbs travel a little bit quicker to make sure you're getting that health as soon as you can. The first very important node to get is Mana Feast. So this is going to make our blood orbs also give us mana back. So the one node in here is going to give us 3 mana. The skill itself costs 3 mana, so this will completely offset the mana cost that you'd have for using this skill. Now, while leveling, I did put 2 points in here instead of 1. This is going to make it so we don't need to get the 3 points in Thirst quite yet, which will also reduce the mana cost to 0, so that way we're able to generate mana. Next up, I went and got the 5 nodes into Splatter. So this is going to make the Rip Blood hits have a chance to put a blood spatter at the target, dealing damage to other enemies around it. So this is going to give us the AoE factor from Rip Blood. Next, we're going to go over and grab Eviscerate. This is going to give us another 100% blood splatter chance and add a little bit of extra mana cost. Now, with these, we'll have 200% chance to cast a blood splatter. This works very similar to how bleeds or poisons work in this game, where if you're over that 100% cap, then it will actually cast 2 blood spatters per cast of Rip Blood. Next, you want to grab the 2 travel points into Arcane Absorption. It'll give you a little bit of extra spell damage if you've capped Rip Blood recently, which will be all the time. And then for the last note here, we're going to go into Rip Spirit. This is going to convert all of Rip Blood and Blood Splatter's damage over to necrotic damage from its original physical damage. For our fourth skill, we're going to be picking up Bone Curse. And what this does is it allows you to curse an enemy when you target them for 8 seconds, and then every time you hit them with the spell, they take a tiny bit of physical damage. We're not actually going to be setting this skill up to do damage, so all of those points are simply going to be travel nodes. We're going to get a lot of different cool interactions with this skill. For the first points, we're going to take 4 points into Conflation. This is going to increase the area of effect of our curse by 140%, making it easier to hit the target you want. This is mainly to go over and grab Sigil of Mortality. What this does is allow Bone Curse to also apply Mark for Death for 2 seconds. Now, what Mark for Death does is it makes that target have 25% less of all of its resistance, which is going to include Necrotic. After that, we're going to go over here and take 2 travel points into Iron Maiden. This just adds a little bit of damage to the Bone Curse, which, like I said, is not very important. Next, we're going to grab all 3 points into Brittle Bones. Now, this is why I took off some of the kill threshold points on Transplant when using the hardcore version of the build, because you're already going to get some kill threshold right here. And pretty much every target you kill is going to have Bone Curse on it. So this is automatically going to kill any enemy with Bone Curse that has less than 12% health. Next, we're going to grab the 3 points into Cursed Limbs. This is going to make it so if you've cast Bone Curse recently, any of your other spells that you hit an enemy with will also apply Bone Curse. This is going to be really important for the next point we're going to grab. After you grab the 3 points here, you're going to go over and take Oppressive Gaze. What this is going to do is it's going to make your Bone Curse only affect one target instead of everything in its area of effect. But with that, it's also going to make those curses last forever. This is going to really help you not run out of mana by casting a ton of Bone Curses and make boss fights way easier to manage your spells. After that, we're going to go over and grab Ruptured Corpse. It's going to add a little bit of extra mana cost to the skill, but it's going to make it so if an enemy dies that's afflicted with Bone Curse, it's going to make them explode and deal extra damage and an area of effect around them to nearby enemies, just making our clear feel a little bit more smooth. And then for the last 5 points, we're going to throw them into Defiled Defenses. This is going to make any target that has Bone Curse on it, when you hit it, it has a 100% chance to shred armor, just giving us a little bit of extra damage from our spells. Now for our last skill, we're of course going to be taking Reaper Form. This is stable in pretty much every single Lich build you're going to find. What it does is allows you to turn into a Reaper, temporarily granting the ability called Reap. This is just an additional movement skill. Now while in Reaper form, your health is not going to regen, and your health is going to start decaying over time. Now when your health reaches 0, instead of dying, you're going to transform back to human form and then heal to full health. This is essentially going to give you a cheat death and give you a ton of extra damage that synergizes really well with Death Seal. Now for the first points, we're going to go over and grab 1 point into Soul for Soul. This is going to give you 20% increased damage while in Reaper form, and then give you minus 10% healing effectiveness. Next, we're going to grab 2 points into Reaper's Curse. It's going to give you an additional 50% damage and crit chance while in Reaper form. And the negative side effect is every time you get a kill, it's going to take away 1% of your health. With how much leech we get, that's not going to really matter though. Next, we'll go over to Death Comes Quickly. So we're going to take 2 points here, which is going to give us a 50% chance to gain Swiftness on kill, which is going to give you 1% increased movement speed and can stack up to 10 times. After that, we're going to Rapid Destruction. This is going to give us 30% increased cast speed while in Reaper form. That's going to help us get off a lot more casts, which is going to synergize really well with the uniques that we're running. After that, we're going to go down south to Death Touch Scythe. This is just going to add a bunch of flat necrotic damage to all our spells. Then we're going to take all 5 nodes into Executioner. This is going to give us 50% critical strike multiplier while in Reaper form. After that, you're going to want to start off just taking 1 point into Swift Harbinger, just so you can get over here to Unholy Dominion. What this is going to do is, since last patch, they actually combined the cooldown of both Reap and Transplant. So Transplant we're going to be using a lot of the time for clear, and we want to still be able to move around the map as quickly as we can so we don't lose our Reaper form. This is going to make them both independent cooldowns again, so you can Transplant and then immediately after that you can Reap to just zoom around as quickly as you can. After you've grabbed the point to Unholy Dominion, you can go ahead and grab the extra 2 points in Swift Harbinger. This just gives you a little bit of cooldown recovery on your Reap. Up, we're going to go into the base Acolyte skill tree here. So for the first points, you're going to want to put them into Forbidden Knowledge. This is going to give you some intellect, which is going to scale all of our damage, as well as give us some free necrotic resistance. Next, you're going to grab all 8 points in Stolen Vitality. We're mainly doing that just for the flat vitality it's going to give us, giving us a higher health pool to work with. And then lastly, we're going to grab 4 points into Blood Aura, just giving us that 24% increased damage. The rest of our passive points are going to be going over to the Lich tree here. First, you're going to want to put your 6 points into Survival of the Cruel. This is going to give us some flat health, and then something you're going to see come up over and over again in the tree here is leeched health. This is going to help us keep up the Reaper form. Since Reaper form's constantly draining our HP, we need some way to combat that, and so we're going to get several nodes that are going to give us leech for all of our spells. Next, we're going to put 8 points over to Dance with Death. This is going to give us 40% increased damage. However, while you're below 35% health, that is going to be tripled. So it's going to give you 120% damage instead. Now, if you remember, while using Death Seal, it's going to seal our HP at 33%. Always making sure we're getting that extra damage here with this note. Next up, we'll be grabbing the 5 points into Grasp with Fate. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to give us a whole bunch of percent necrotic damage. After that, we're going to Bed of Souls. That's going to give us a whole bunch of flat vitality to increase our health. The increased health regen isn't going to do anything since we don't actually regen health during Reaper 4. Next up is Crippling Insight, taking all 8 nodes. It's a whole bunch of flat intellect, which is going to scale all that damage. With it does come the cost of having a tiny bit of less health regeneration, which again doesn't really matter while we're in Reaper form anyways. After that, we're going to 3 Plagues for the 24% necrotic penetration. Then we'll grab the 5 points into Deathbringer. Gives us 50% critical strike chance and that 15% increased cast speed. Next, we'll go into Dark Guard for an additional 50% critical strike chance. The ward gain on critical strike will help while you're outside of your Death Seal, but while you do have Death Seal active, you can't gain any ward, so that won't do a whole lot for you. Next up, you'll want to grab all 5 points here for the critical strike multiplier. After that, we're going to Necrotic Energy. This is going to give us a whole bunch of just flat spell necrotic damage. Then you'll grab the 10 points into Elixir of Death. Now, this is where the skill in Death Seal that makes it so draining health effects don't affect you applies. So when you use a potion, you take less physical and necrotic damage for 4 seconds, but a percent of your health is drained each second. So what I do is every time I hit Death Seal, I just pop a quick potion. Gives me a 50% less damage taken for those 2 elements, which is a huge defense for me, and I don't get any of the negative side effects. After that, we're going to go into Ageless Ascetic. This is going to give us 5% increased attack speed, 5% movement speed, and more damage leached as health. Next, we're going to go for Wands of the Fallen. You deal increased spell damage if you are equipped with a one-handed weapon and do not have a shield equipped. We're going to be equipping a Catalyst, so this would apply to us, giving it an additional 50% spell damage. And then the most important point on the tree here, Soul Maw. It's going to give us 5% of our damage leech as health and increase our overall health leech by 25%. This is going to give so much sustain for your Reaper form, making it so you almost never lose that form. Alrighty, guys, it's finally time to go over the two uniques that we're going to be using with this build. Now, these uniques are not mandatory for the build, but you will be losing a whole bunch of damage if you don't have them, so they're highly recommended. Now, the first unique we're going to be using is the Marina's Lost Soul Wand. Now, it's going to give us a decent amount of spell necrotic damage, some increased spell damage, and a decent chunk of cast speed. But the main reason we're using this wand is where it says you are damned when you cast a spell. If you guys remember going back over to the Death Seal tree, most of our damage was coming from this node right here, Doom Call. You gain a stack of damage for each second you remain sealed, and you get a whole bunch of increased damage as multiplicative with Death Wave for every stack of damned you have. So having a weapon that's casting a damn stack on us every time we cast a spell is massive. We are going to have a ton of Rip Bloods going off, explosions from Transplant. Transplant's also going to cast more Rip Bloods. Death Seal's going to be casting the Death Seal explosions for us, the waves, and we're going to be casting Bone Curse. We are going to be stacking those damn stacks really, really fast, and it's going to give us a crap ton of damage. Now, the downside of using the wand is it does give us minus 10% reduced health. That's going to be completely offset by the next unique. The other unique we're going to be using is Twisted Heart. Now, what this does is it's going to give us up to 20% increased health, so offsetting that wand. Now, a percent of your current health is going to be converted to ward when you directly cast a necrotic spell. They'll give you a little bit of survivability while you're in human form if you do happen to lose Reaper, because you're going to be leeching health so fast, you're going to immediately make up that difference. It's going to give you a little bit of a buffer. And then you're also going to get a +1 to spell necrotic skills. That's going to count your Death Seal, which means you can get those extra frequency nodes that also give you a crit chance. And then on top of that, you're going to get a tiny bit of cast speed. Now, the last part that we're going to go over is the rest of the gear. The important part to focus on when gearing is trying to get to your endurance cap as quickly as you can. What endurance does is it makes you take a percent of less damage if you're under a certain threshold. So for this build, our endurance threshold is currently set at 739 HP. So anytime we're below that number, we're going to take up to 60% less damage. So you're going to want to try to get that as soon as you can. Other than that, on the gear, you're mainly looking for necrotic damage, crit chance, crit multiplier, and cast speed. And then for the suffixes, we're grabbing our resistances to cap as close as we can, and then grabbing any other suffixes as extra health. The only difference from that is going to be on the helmet, where you're going to try to get plus levels to Death Seal, so you get more frequency of your death waves, and some increased cooldown recovery for both your Death Seal and for Transplant. I'm going to hover over each piece here so you can kind of see what the ideal stats would be for each piece of gear. And then as far as the blessings go, you're mainly going to be looking for the necrotic shred chance, and then just any endurance threshold, crit avoidance, or any kind of resistances you can get. For the idols, we're mainly looking for that cooldown recovery of Transplant. Since that's our main clear skill outside of Death Seal, it'll help make the build feel a lot smoother. Thank you guys for checking out the build guide, and again, huge thanks to Mao for letting me showcase his build. If you enjoyed the video, hitting like and subscribe is a free way to support the channel, and if you'd like to see me make these builds live, you can check me out at twitch.tv/pinchingloaf. I'm live pretty much every day at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and would love for you guys to come say hi.